Everything Everywhere All at Once is a fantastic movie. This isn't a hot take or a contrarian opinion to have, with it being received well by both fans and critics, along with winning a whole host of awards for essentially all of its parts. And while I can passion dump over the amazing and unique technical choices made by the directors, cast and crew that make it such a spectacle, there are many people who are way more qualified than I am that have thoroughly dissected every individual theme and element this film has to offer to such a degree that I'd only be repeating what they had to say. So instead of talking about what makes this movie such a technical marvel, I'm personally more interested in the ethereal elements of the movie. The parts that make me not only see this as a great piece of science fiction, but also as a genuinely important piece of art for our time. Daniel Kwan, the co-director for the movie alongside Daniel Scheinert, puts it best when he describes the movie as a roller coaster that heals you by the end of it. Because while the movie at face value is this batshit insane and off-the-walls multiverse epic with a maximalist presentation and Hong Kong-style fight scenes, it's fundamentally a story of a family learning to accept each other in spite of their differences. A simple story wrapped in an overwhelming presentation. But at the same time, it's so much more than just the sum of its parts. And it's that missing link which, at least to me, makes this movie important. Something that I can only describe as joy is both a literal character and a key theme in Everything Everywhere All at Once. In the opening scene of the movie, we're introduced to the Wang family, comprised of Evelyn and Waymond, a wife and husband who immigrated from China and opened a laundromat in America. We see Evelyn presented as business-oriented and matter-of-fact, which contrasts her husband that she only sees as naive and aloof. Throughout the movie, Evelyn is dismissive of her husband and seems to linger on what could have been if her life had worked out differently, while, on the contrary, her husband, Waymond, initially seems perfect and happy, until it's revealed that he's filed for divorce. Then we have their daughter, who just so happens to be called Joy. Funny that. Joy is a similarly troubled character, as she finds her mother once again dismissive of her as well, due to being in a long-term lesbian relationship with her partner, Becky. As you can probably tell from that short introduction, the Wang family are highly dysfunctional, but more than that, they're all seeking some form of joy in their life. Evelyn is seeking the joy of her perceived wasted potential, Waymond is seeking the joy of a loving family, and Joy, the person, just wants to be accepted for who she is by her family, which is highlighted when Evelyn refuses to introduce Becky as Joy's girlfriend to Gong Gong, her father, who Evelyn fears won't be able to handle the news due to being from an older generation. This idea of joy, or in this case a lack thereof, is only amplified when we get to the primary antagonist of the film, but hold on, we'll get back to that in a bit. In a literal sense, Evelyn is pushing Joy away with how she treats her daughter, but in a much more pretentious and metaphorical sense, she's also pushing away the joy in her life, her family. She may not have realized her more material dreams, but she refuses to even acknowledge her husband and doesn't even try to understand her daughter, almost seeing like she's ashamed of her and hiding behind this excuse of her father when it comes to Joy's sexuality. But Evelyn can only push her daughter so hard until she snaps, which we see later on in the film. Ooh, bit of foreshadowing there for you. Love that. For me, these introductions to our characters are extremely powerful and set up the events of the film so well in regards to how they're going to interact. But this more pervasive feeling of modern life lacking joy within a family is something so relevant to our time. We all seem to want something more out of life, and when we focus too much on what could have been, we miss out on what is in front of us, and the joy that we can find in everyday life. I think this is because modern life is, well, it's overwhelming. Another major element of the movie is the ride that it takes you on emotionally. By the end of the movie, you feel genuinely overwhelmed, hence the roller coaster I mentioned earlier. And don't get me wrong, this is a good thing. It's by design. The Daniels have talked before about how the internet was an inspiration for them when they were incorporating the multiverse elements into the movie, and frankly, I think it's a genius comparison to make. I mean, if everything, everywhere, all at once doesn't sum up the feeling of being online right now, then I don't know what does. Or maybe I just need to get off of Twitter, who knows. My point is, from the moment that the multiverse is introduced, the movie almost immediately throws out these concepts and themes and sci-fi techno-speak at you, and honestly, it's hard to keep up with them. Especially in how we're first introduced to it through Evelyn being pulled about between universes and not being present for important events in her life, and does that sound familiar to anyone at all, or just me? Now, I can't speak for everyone, but I grew up in the first fully online generation. I've felt this feeling of not being present, and more recently, I've felt distracted, with my mind racing all over the place and not really being able to focus. Looking back, I never really tried all that hard at anything growing up, and now I'm out in the real world working a 9 to 5, I can't help but look back and think about all the possibilities I missed out on and the potential I wasted. Evelyn embodies this sort of retroactive FOMO that I think a lot of people feel. Later on in the movie, it's revealed that the Evelyn we see in the opening scene is the only Evelyn in the entire multiverse to not have accomplished anything, and I think it's so easy to fall into having these intrusive thought patterns of what could have been, or how our lives could have been different or changed in some kind of meaningful way. And frankly, it feels overwhelming. The movie does a fantastic job of presenting that sensation of having a million thoughts and what-ifs racing around your head and not being able to control them. Initially, we see Evelyn become actually empowered through the multiverse, with the film's key plot device of verse jumping being introduced. Wait a second, I forgot to introduce verse jumping. Shit. Essentially, a Wayman from another universe, Alpha Wayman from the Alphaverse, he's a strong, confident, and domineering version of the Wayman that we know, turns up, and gives Evelyn the ability to access alternate universes where she made different decisions and access their memory and skills. That all makes sense? I hope so. Anyway, we're moving on. This initially empowers Evelyn. She finds strength through being able to live out the lives she wished she had, quite literally. However, the taste of what could have been makes Evelyn emotionally shallow. She doesn't want to go back to being who she was, and even flat out tells her Wayman that she prefers the alternative universe version of him. Evelyn becomes trapped in these infinite possibilities that are so tantalizing to her, and eventually it breaks her. Jobu Tapaki, see, I said we'd get there, suffers a similar fate. The alias of Evelyn's daughter Joy from another universe is the same as Evelyn in that she can see everything, everywhere, all at once. She was pushed too far by Alphaverse Evelyn in a verse jumping experiment, and the omniscience that is the end result of that experiment only makes Jobu see her life and her actions as meaningless. In her eyes, nothing matters, as every choice she makes is neither right, wrong, or even her own, as another version of herself has made the other choice, with both realities being just as real and valid. Jobu is the representation of the contemporary nihilist that I'm sure most people that are terminally online or were just edgy and 14 have been through at some point. And this seems like a reasonable conclusion to make, especially for someone who's alone like Jobu. If you don't feel like anything you do matters, then why care? Why not just do what Jobu decides to do and end it all by throwing yourself into the most well-seasoned bagel ever? One with everything on it. But that isn't the conclusion that this movie draws. It goes a step further. And this is where At least for me, this movie transcends being just great and becomes so important. It teaches us how to find that joy in a world where nothing matters. The presentation of Jobu's philosophy that nothing matters is initially soothing to Evelyn, as from Jobu's perspective, it removes the suffering from doing nothing with your life. But in this case, all it really does is replace that suffering with a malaise of apathy. Why care about anything at all when it ultimately wouldn't matter anyway? When we expand our scope of what's important to us, we lose the small victories and moments of joy that make life worth living. Although Evelyn is framed as living her worst self, not having achieved any conventional success in her life, this is also framed as an infinite possibility, which is empowering. It's never too late to be the best version of yourself, but that's only the first half of finding joy. Once we learn to appreciate what we do have and stop holding on to this idea of potential, only then can we strive for something more. Only then can we strive for real happiness. And as pretentious as that last sentence was, we do see a glimpse into that in the next scene. Well, after Jobu gets fucking bodied by Turbo Gong Gong.
I'm not your father.
And now for something completely different.
We see a scene of the only thing that really does matter, the goofy and inconsequential moments that we spend with the people we care about. In this instance, it's the Wang family all laughing about how ridiculous the situation that they find themselves in is. And while I haven't seen anyone talk about this scene since it's so minor and almost transitional in nature, it's the first moment we have of Evelyn, Waymond, and Joy just having fun in each other's company. There's no animosity, no stress, or no fear. It's just a family riffing off of each other and laughing together. Now, I haven't talked about Waymond yet, but I really want to right now because he represents this joy so perfectly. We're later shown him in an alternate universe where he never married Evelyn and ended up becoming materially successful. They do end up reuniting at a movie premiere in a different universe, and Evelyn tries to tell Waymond how they would have been miserable together and how their life would have sucked. And this just culminates in Waymond giving probably the best single line in the entire movie, and one that makes me cry every time that I see it.
如果有来生，我还是会选择和你一起报税，开心一点。
It's a beautiful antidote to pessimistic nihilism encapsulated in just a few words. We can strive for success, and hell, some of us might even achieve it, but what does it matter without loved ones to share it with? We live in a world where we can live vicariously through successful people and see the most amazing things at the touch of a button, yet more often than not, these external metrics for success don't seem to fulfill people, and we know this deep down. We know we can hit our goals time and time again, but it simply isn't in our nature to be satisfied. We live in a world where facts don't matter, our accomplishments are ultimately meaningless, and hell, maybe even our choices aren't real. And if that's the case, maybe how we feel is the only truth in our world at all. And if that's the case, then maybe we should just be kind.
The only thing I do know is that we have to be kind. Please, be kind. Especially when we don't know.
Now, Waymond isn't a main character. He's a support character. The best supportive character. To catch everybody up, Waymond is presented as goofy and dependent through the eyes of Evelyn, but in reality, he's a survivor. He confronts the cruelty of our modern world, and instead of trying to fight it with violence and impose his will upon it, he tries to understand the world and the people who inhabit it. Even when he's eventually stabbed by Evelyn after she gives up on everything, he still wants to just understand what's going on. Waymond gives a speech towards the end of the movie when everyone's scared and confused and times seem more uncertain than ever, pleading for kindness, begging people to just stop fighting, and once again I can't help but get emotional at this scene. War and collapse dominate our headlines. People seem more divided than ever before. We're all scared and confused, and I think a lot of people react to that fear and confusion with violence, and hell, I can't say I blame them. I'm guilty of that too. But although be kind is about as simple of a message as you can get, something about it just seems so important right here, right now. Hell, it's a message we need right here and right now, because at the end of the day, I think we could all do with a bit more kindness in our lives. Uncertainty also plays into the final scenes of the movie. Evelyn adopts the mantra of being kind and uses it to try and bring her daughter back instead of pushing her away even further, and it almost works. Evelyn gets to talk to her daughter and just try to understand her, but despite her best efforts, Joy just wants her suffering to end. She's in pain and just wants out. But Evelyn can't accept it. While she now understands how Joy feels, Evelyn never got how she felt across, explaining that she too has frustrations with her daughter and that the generational disputes they have go both ways. They both have their perspective on their issues with each other, and they both feel differently, but at the end of the day, they hash it out. There's no certainty that they or we will be happy. And even if they are, there isn't any guarantee that that happiness they feel will ever last more than a few fleeting moments. But even in those moments, however fleeting they might be, there's no one that they'd rather spend that time with than each other. The movie doesn't claim to guarantee happiness through being kind and understanding each other, but it does show that while we can live in a cruel world where suffering is forced on us indiscriminately, what makes it all worthwhile are the people that we love and the kindness that we're capable of giving. At the end of the day, Everything Everywhere All at Once is many things. Maximalist, visually stunning, crazy, and so much more. But at its core, deep down, it's so hopeful and so full of joy. And I, for one, am okay with that. Even if I haven't convinced you that this movie is important, it is still special to me. As corny as it is, I've tried to be more like Waymond in my everyday life and appreciate the small things that make it that much more special. I've been in a lot of dark places before in my life, and the only reason that I'm still here is because of the amazing people I've surrounded myself with and the work that I've put in to appreciate myself more. And I genuinely feel that this movie gave me a greater sense of appreciation for myself and the people around me. I may be being hyperbolic, or perhaps this movie might have just specifically appealed to me more than most. I don't doubt that that's true. But I do genuinely believe everything I've said in this video. And if you take nothing else away from it, even if you don't watch the movie or haven't seen it, or heck, even if you hated it, please be kind to one another. It's the only thing we can do. If you've made it to the end, then thank you for watching. This video was a real emotional ride for me to write, and I really hope you enjoyed it and that it turned out okay. It's my first attempt at making anything like this, so while I'm sure it's rough around the edges, hopefully the final product isn't complete shit. Either way, I really enjoyed making it, and I'll definitely be doing more stuff like this in the future. Whether it's like this or something completely different, I have no idea. But either way, thanks again for listening to my over-sentimental ravings on my favourite movie from last year, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And don't forget to watch the movie. It's really good.